So, the series is officially out. Sold in America is out, and we hope
you watched all of it.
You better have.
Yes.
You better have watched all of it. If you haven't, the link for the documentary will be below. First of all, thank you guys so much for watching, for all of your feedback, for engaging, for being super supportive and like an incredible part of this, and for following this journey of ours, just doing these videos just for you so that we can kind of have like this straight conversation and interact with you guys, and we had a lot of fun doing it. Yeah. So now that you guys have watched the series, one thing that we wanted to talk about, which was something that people were asking before we even released the series or the name, is how can you, the viewer, fight harm being done in the sex trade? Like, for starters, it goes for like understanding the root causes of harm throughout the sex trade, which is something that we covered in Sold in America several times.
Some of the big takeaways from the series for us that we didn't know going into it were that there are a really wide range of experiences in the sex trade, from really bad coercion through like lack of choices up until like some kind of high choice, high privilege situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like we learned that at all of those levels, there's harm being done, whether it's like on the high choice and stigma of working in the sex trade, to like the very bad coercion and survival sex where there's like terrible violence happening. And so I feel like there aren't a lot of solutions that could address all of that, which is kind of what we covered in the series. Like, it's really hard to find a solution when this many people have different states.
Like, it's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
But as viewers, as members of our society and in our community, there are things that you can do to just alleviate harm being done in the sex trade and commercial sexual exploitation, and that goes with understanding the root causes of harm throughout the situation. So a couple of them that we think are super important is working on issues like homelessness, specifically youth homelessness and poverty, having everyone at the table when having these conversations, and that means having survivors of sex trafficking or survivors of prostitution at the table talking about what needs to happen in order for us, what are the policies that need to be in place to help them.
Especially because we learned that like every single place needs a different approach.
Yeah.
Like what's working in Seattle would not work in Nevada, would not work in DC. And so it's about every single place getting all of those people together and figuring out
the survivors of that area.
Yeah. Yeah. Survivors from like all ends, I feel like. Yep. Survivors of trafficking, people who were in the sex trade because they didn't have any other choices, kind of all of those people.
What do we tell educators and medical professionals and local religious groups about how to get involved with alleviating this problem?
I think we really learned that there's a pretty big training gap that's missing right now.
Yes.
So we heard in the first episode from the medical professionals who missed cases of trafficking because they just kind of wrote off the patient as a bad kid. So I think there's a really big piece missing in our society where we need to see people as someone that needs help, someone who's a worthy victim, and kind of take away the stigma that's often tied to class and sexual orientation, gender orientation, race. Yeah, so that was a really big thing that I think needs to be fixed. Is training people, because you know we've all heard the stories of like flight attendants getting involved.
Yeah,
sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. But it's kind of those like finding the people who touch the people that might be involved and finding a way to help them understand what's going on.
And understanding like the signs that are out there. Because one thing that every single survivor and I think every single sex worker that we've talked to mentioned was like people not asking if they're okay or not asking how are you or if you need help. So if you see somebody who's struggling or something does look off or they look like they're in a shady situation, ask if they need help. Ask if everything is okay. Make sure you are in a safe position to do that so that you don't put yourself in harm's way, but ask those questions and be that concerned citizen. Do not make assumptions about other people. If you do see people who are potentially sex workers on like your street or in your neighborhood, don't make judgments about them. I think the biggest thing for us is that we realize that everybody has different experiences, but our preconceived notions and our judgments only harm other people. And you don't want to be that person. So if you want to like engage in conversation or ask if that person is okay, do that. But if you like, don't judge and don't teach those around you to judge or to make assumptions or like call people names and stuff, because a lot of the times people are doing like what you're like, everybody's doing what they can to survive. And that was like a really big thing that we learned.
You should always have survivors at the forefront of whatever you're working on. So say you want to donate to a local anti-trafficking organization, you should make sure that it's led by survivors, because with any attempt to like be charitable or help with something, like you should always ask the people, what do they want? You shouldn't just give them things or
Don't
resources.
assume that you know the resources that are needed. Always ask, what can I do for you? How can I be at your service? What do you need from us as a community? And make sure that like you advocate for those who are being oppressed by our society. And a lot of the people who are in this, who are working in the sex trade are doing so because, and we cover this in the series, but are doing this because this is like the social safety net they've created for themselves, because we haven't provided one for them. And so if you are in a position to ask, to educate, to advocate, do that, but do that based on what those around you actually need, because they've told you so. So youth homelessness is something that we thought was pretty objective in a way for us to kind of, was a great starting point for us to figure out a way to tackle and to help out. And that was a whole conversation that we had. So if you want to.
Yeah, because I mean, we realize there's that spectrum of experiences, and sometimes along that spectrum, people don't really agree on what the solution should be, which was kind of hard for us to realize, because some of our sources were advocating for stuff that other sources were super opposed to. And that was like a really difficult thing as a journalist to cover. But we realized that like on all ends of the spectrum, it's kind of the issues of housing and where you're gonna get your next meal that can have a really big effect on this. So for instance, LGBT youth are really disproportionately trafficked. And we realized that a lot of the reasons for that, you talked to that researcher who did a big study on it. This is
what?
Do you wanna say like this is part of the podcast?
Oh, are we mentioning that yet? Okay, well, I mean, we're having the entire conversation on camera, so guess what, guys? We haven't announced it yet. There's going to be a podcast following this Sold in America podcast. I don't know if that's what it's going to be called. It probably, I mean, I feel like it might be.
I don't know.
But anyway, so in the podcast, we are covering the harms that are being done throughout the sex trade, and one of the biggest ones is youth homelessness, and like a heavy focus on LGBT youth homelessness. And we talked to a researcher. They had talked to around like 1,000 different youth who were homeless. A huge part of the reasons of the homelessness was because of two things, and one was foster care and like being placed in a home that they felt like it was unsafe, and the other issue that was covered was when you are like oftentimes when people come out and they get kicked out of their families' homes, that leads to youth homelessness. And I think that there was like, it was around 20% of youth on their first day of homelessness are asked to engage in sex for money. And people constantly take advantage of younger folks who are on the street because they know that they need money to survive, and so they're going to take advantage of that. So we felt like whether it was trafficking or survival sex or later on sex work, that homelessness and youth homelessness was a huge objective issue that like you can't really argue about like this being a problem, because it is a problem.
Because even we talked to some people in Boston who told us about a pimp who would specifically look for people who were on the street and then like groom them, and he would basically
exploit them and
because they were on the street. So yeah, we just consistently heard that housing was the issue to work on for this.
So yeah, getting involved with that. And then when you do get involved with like local trafficking organizations in your area, which I guarantee you there are, if you look hard enough, there are across the country, to make sure that there are survivors on the board who are leading the efforts and constantly going with the question, like, how can we help you? And not being afraid to talk about this issue, not being afraid to talk about harms being done in the sex trade and challenging people's thoughts and preconceived notions, because a lot of people have judgments about this issue before ever talking to somebody who's actually a survivor.
Yeah,
and
then I think another thing that we learned about from like the demand side, which there are criticisms of that approach, but I think one thing that like objectively is good is, like, in our culture, we need to think about how we're objectifying women, how men see women, and I think men have just as much of a responsibility to learn about this issue and understand the harms that are being done.
Especially if a majority of the buyers and the people who are fueling this with their money are men. So this is not a women's issue. This is a human rights issue. This is a health issue. This is a socioeconomic, social justice issue. So yeah, in conclusion, not in conclusion, but just thank you guys so much again for watching. We hope that you enjoyed the documentary. We hope you enjoyed this little series. Make sure you share these videos, share the documentary, have conversations, reach out to us on social media with any questions that you guys have. We're going to surprise you guys with some spin-off videos from the past year of reporting that we've been doing this, and the podcast will follow that. So we will be talking about this for a while. We hope that this helped, and
let's keep the conversation
keep the conversation going. Thanks for getting involved, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey friends, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, comment, and of course subscribe. And don't forget to hit me up on Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. See you guys on the next one.